All righty, Drew Newman, welcome to the show.
Welcome to our 113-year-old cigar factory.
Thanks for having us here. This is such an exciting episode. I don't think we've done an episode outside of our studio, so this is really cool for us. Thank you.
Well, this is authentic Tampa. This is Tampa history, and excited to tell you more about it.
Well, so what room is this, man? This is a cool room.
So we're on the third floor of our 113-year-old El Reloj cigar factory here in Ybor City, and this is the American room. And this is called the American room because it's where we hand roll our flagship cigar, the American. Would you like one?
Absolutely. Let's break one out.
Let me hand you one of our Toros.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful cigar, handmade here in Ybor City, just like my great-grandfather did more than a century ago. And
amazing.
What's really special about this cigar is not only was the American the very first cigar that was rolled when El Reloj was built in 1910 and opened, but it's also a completely unique cigar because it's the only 100% all-American cigar. Not only is it made here in Ybor City, but every piece of tobacco, the band, the boxes, the labels, the hinges, the cellophane tube, literally everything is made in the United States, which is very unusual.
Well, how awesome is that? And what made you guys decide to make this cigar?
We reintroduced the cigar in 2019 because the story of Ybor City, of Tampa, and American cigar rolling had kind of been lost and overlooked for decades. Mm-hmm. Tampa was a fine cigar capital of the world 100 years ago. More cigars were rolled here in Ybor City and Tampa than anywhere else in the world. If you wanted a cigar, you wanted a Tampa cigar.
Right.
But in the decades that followed, in the second half of the 20th century, factories here in Tampa closed. One by one, they shut their doors. They moved overseas. They opened up in Latin America. And there's wonderful cigars from Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But what had been lost in the past few decades was the story and tradition of cigar making here in Cigar City. So we wanted to recreate this historic cigar brand that spans more than a century, that's an authentic Tampa cigar, and roll it with entirely American components to highlight the tradition, the history, the legacy of cigar making in the United States.
That's so amazing. And what a beautiful label too. Now, was did the old label look exactly like this?
That's it. That's what I was going to say. Like you can praise us for the label and the cigar band, but all we did was simply recreate what was done in the past.
Amazing.
We took an old band, an old cigar box from the American from the early 1900s, and we just recreated it and reprinted it, and here we are.
Beautiful.
So it's the flagship cigar of the factory.
And if someone wants to pick these up, what does this bad boy retail for?
This cigar retails for $21, which is on the more expensive end of handmade cigars, but the reality is that just because all the labor is done in the United States.
Yeah.
And the reason why most handcrafted cigars are rolled overseas is because cigar is a very labor-intensive process.
Right.
And so by rolling it overseas, you can save on that. So American cigars are more expensive because it's a handcraft.
It's so popular right now to have all-American products, so how fitting you guys do this. This is amazing. I love it. Let me grab that cutter.
Absolutely. Let me pass the lighter to you next. We are an American company. My great-grandfather started our company in 1895. We're the oldest family-owned premium cigar manufacturer in the United States, and this is the last last traditional cigar factory operating not only in Tampa, but really in the entire country. And so it's what sets us apart in the cigar world is the fact that we are American cigar makers. So we think it's very fitting for us to be hand-rolling a premium cigar like this here in Tampa in the United States with all American tobacco and components.
Amazing, man. And how did you get into the business? Obviously, it's your family, but did you take a different route when you were younger, or did you know growing up, hey, man, I'm gonna do cigars?
Well, so my great-grandfather started a company in 1895 and passed it down to my grandfather, who passed it down to my father and uncle. We're in the process of passing it down to my cousins and me. But we're a family business. So what do we do when we get together for Thanksgiving or birthdays or other celebrations? Everyone invariably starts talking about cigars. And so I've grown up in this company I've grown up in this building as a little kid. I used to run around here when I was just a young child exploring. It's a fascinating place. And so I've known about the company. I've been a part of it all my life. I started working part-time as a teenager. And so it was kind of always expected.
Yeah.
But I did take a different path, too. After graduating high school in 2000, I went to college up north and then moved to D.C. and was there for 10 years, went to law school, practiced law for the local city government there for a while, then moved to New York, where I worked for a nonprofit up in Harlem for a while, and then went to grad school again, and then transitioned to our company full-time in 2017, working remotely from New York and then back here in the cigar city of Tampa.
Amazing.
Just over a year ago.
That's awesome, man. So when you were in law school and practicing as a lawyer, did you feel like, oh, this just isn't for me? Were you drawn to get back here?
No, I mean, I never disengaged from our company. I was always a part of our family business. And so it wasn't a separation, but for me, law school was just a great place to learn how to learn and learn how to think. And so much of what we do is within the structure of law. And so being able to have that background and bring it to our company has been helpful for me to be able to contribute back to our family business. So I'm the only lawyer in the family. So
oh, that's nice.
It's a way for me to come back and actually help our company grow with my legal background and not just sort of take away from the company, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah. This thing is phenomenal, by the way. So smooth. What a great cigar. The American. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you for these, man.
They're rolled right here by Louis and Yenny in this first row, right behind us.
Amazing.
Each of them rolls about 70, 80 cigars a day, no more. And so it really is a handcrafted process from start to finish, and it's made in small batches, just the way it always has been.
That's incredible. When Sydney was walking us through the back area, it was really interesting to Tyler and I to kind of see the process of how tobacco was imported. I didn't really know how it was imported and unpacked. It's kind of flaked out.
Sure.
Could you describe that process of how a cigar is made from when the tobacco is grown till you light it up?
Of course. So a handcrafted cigar is a natural agricultural product. We roll them today the same way we've been doing for 100 years with just 3 ingredients: natural aged leaves, a little bit of water, and a little bit of a glue that just holds it all together. But so cigars, I think, are a lot like wine. Just as winemakers take different seeds and plant them, and then they may blend the grapes together to create interesting blended wine, we do the same with cigars and cigar tobacco. We can take one seed that's grown in Connecticut and plant it in Nicaragua, and the tobacco that's grown tastes completely different because of the soil content and the differences in climates. And even from year to year, the same farm, the amount of sunlight, wind, and rain can vary from season to season, and it produces different types of tobacco. And so what we do as cigar makers is we harness that natural variety to create unique and interesting blends. But one difference between cigars and wine is whereas wine is made with fresh grapes and then aged, cigars are made with aged tobacco. So the tobacco in the cigar that we're smoking, the wrapper here is this was probably rolled last year, a year ago, and the tobacco in it is the wrapper is probably from 2018.
Wow.
And the filler is probably just a little younger, but it's an aged product. But
like a whiskey or a wine.
Very much so. But we do most of our aging before being rolled, and then we'll age it again after the cigar is finished in our aging rooms downstairs. But to your question, cigars and tobacco really are stable when they're dry. And so tobacco is aged bone dry in bales, and they're just basically left alone to sleep. And so one of the steps in the process that you saw earlier today is that when we're ready to use a bale of tobacco, we have to add moisture to it. And so we open up the bale, it's bone dry, we add moisture to it, and then you can actually roll it into a cigar.
I was getting a buzz walking through that room, man. There was so much tobacco in the air. I was like, woo, I don't even need to smoke a cigar. I can just walk through this place.
It's natural. It's a natural smell, and it's the smell of Tampa.
It's amazing. There was certain legislation coming up, something along the lines of they were going to regulate cigars like they were cigarettes. And I saw an article about you guys were very involved with talking to the government about that. What's going on with that?
So we're still stuck, unfortunately, in regulatory purgatory. And the challenge is a handcrafted cigar is a product made out of tobacco leaves, just like cigarettes, some e-cigarettes, pipes, hookah, you name it. There's a wide spectrum of products made from tobacco or derived from tobacco. And the challenge for us is that this handcrafted process that you see behind us, it's artisanal, it's handcrafted, it hasn't changed. There's not a lot of technology. And so in 2014, FDA decided to expand its authority to regulate all tobacco products. And that, of course, included handcrafted premium cigars. But the problem is we're not like cigarettes. We don't have big machines. We don't use chemicals. There's no non-natural products added to this. And so FDA decided in 2014 the easiest way to regulate all tobacco products is to adopt a one-size-fits-all policy. So what they did is they took a set of regulations designed for cigarettes and just applied it to all types of tobacco products. Obviously, that didn't work, and so we had and we continue to have to spend a lot of time educating policymakers on why premium cigars, handcrafted cigars, are different.
It's so different.
How they're made, how they're used, who smokes them, who enjoys them, the health effects of all of that. And so for us, it's been a lot of basically educating the regulators who just weren't aware.
It's kind of a challenge, right? I mean, if you guys are the only cigar manufacturer doing this specific type of work here in this country, that's a pretty uphill battle. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of other businesses gathering together with you to help fight that, right?
Well, our industry is very small, and by and large, it's very friendly. We all know each other. Most of our industry is made up of small family businesses who've been working together, helping each other for generations. But one of the challenges is that we're the last American cigar company, and most of our competitors, our friends in the industry, are based in Latin America, and they may not fully understand our legal system, what it's like to talk with folks at the FDA or Congress, because the governments in Latin America just operate differently. And so, right. We feel, I was going to say it's an obligation. It's not. It's more than that. We feel it's our privilege to be ambassadors for the industry here in the United States and here in the city of Tampa too, to educate policymakers, visitors, residents, whomever, about what this traditional American handcraft is. And so, in answer to your question, I think we shoulder more of the burden of this advocacy effort, but it really is a privilege for us to be able to share our story and the story of cigar making in Tampa.
Well, thank God you went to law school, right?
It's helpful. My time in D.C. is very helpful because I'm able to really speak the language of public policy and law, and also speak the language of cigars, and be able to translate the two, which is not always the easiest.
You can really bridge that gap. I think it would be very beneficial. I'm sure you've already thought of this or it's already been done, but having those policymakers come here and see what you guys are up to, it's fascinating stuff. It's so much different from cigarettes or from e-vapes. I think the thought from regulators is, we don't want kids to use tobacco products and get addicted and stuff like that, but cigars are completely different.
They are, and I think you hit the nail on the head what the motivation is, and FDA is right to be concerned about kids using all sorts of adult products, whether it be tobacco or alcohol or drugs or anything like that. They're absolutely right. But what the FDA's data has shown is that children don't smoke premium cigars. They may be interested in lots of things, but a handcrafted $20 cigar is just not on their list, not in their mind. And then secondly, FDA has also conducted research that's shown that the median premium cigar consumer smokes 1.7 premium cigars a month. Not every day,
right?
Not every week, 1 or 2 a month. That's the average. That's the median. That's our typical consumer. And that confirms what we know, which is that our consumers enjoy premium cigars when they're playing golf or fishing or at a wedding, a celebration. It's a product used for relaxation and celebration. It's not a product that's used every day. It's not like a pack or two of cigarettes a day. And then also, premium cigars are not inhaled, like cigarettes are. And so all of that, the fact that children don't enjoy premium cigars, the fact that premium cigars are smoked infrequently and they're not inhaled, just paints a very different picture from a science and a health perspective than it is for cigarettes and other types of tobacco products.
Right. My dad was on the other end of the spectrum on that one. He would be out in the yard doing yard work on a Saturday and smoke 6 or 8 of these.
Really?
He was crazy. Yeah. Well, he's paying for it now, though. He's like hacking up a long every day. He's like, I'd regret it. Don't get into cigars.
There's a wide spectrum of use, but that's kind of true with many things in life.
As with anything.
A person who eats 6 or 8 Big Macs a day is going to feel it later too, and so I think for us, we think that moderation is key, and that's probably a good rule of thumb for most things in life.
And what a great place to manufacture these and enjoy one right here in Ybor City. You mentioned your family's been doing this a long, long time. I think I heard that your family bought this factory, this company, from another family.
Right. This beautiful building that we're in, El Reloj, was a factory we've been in since 1953, but we didn't build it. The Regensburg family built this factory when they moved to Tampa in 1910. Because our origin was not in Tampa. We're actually a latecomer to Tampa. We moved here in 1953. My great-grandfather started a company in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where he settled when he and his family immigrated to America in 1888. So our roots were in Cleveland, and it wasn't until 53 that we moved down here to Tampa.
53. Wow, you guys were late to the game. I mean, when Ybor City was founded as the cigar capital of the world, that was in the late 1800s.
Right.
I mean, you guys were 50, 60 years beyond that.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly. Well, if you think about sort of the nature of business and the economy, in the late 1800s, there were no national brands. Every city, every town had its own bakeries, its own breweries, its own distilleries, its own print shops, its own everything. And they also had their own cigar factories. And so when we started our company in 1895, there were 40,000 licensed cigar manufacturers across the country in cities large and small. And it really wasn't until the first part of the 20th century, when radio became prevalent, that a company could advertise their products nationwide. And then you started seeing industries consolidate. Detroit being Motor City, the automobile industry consolidating there. California wines becoming very prominent. And here in Tampa, the cigar industry really consolidated. And so that's why we moved from Ohio down to Tampa in 1953, is because the future of the cigar industry was here in Cigar City.
That's awesome. Really interesting story. So cigars to me seem like they're making a bit of a comeback. I enjoy a few a year. I'm not that big into it. I love them though. Any chance I get, I'll smoke one. Do you see an increase in cigar usage in the last maybe 5-10 years, at least since you've been deeply involved?
In our company's 128-year history, we've seen a series of cigar booms about every 25 years. The most recent one was during the pandemic in 2020.
Really?
And before that, the one before that was in the mid-90s when Cigar Aficionado magazine came out, and the one before that was in the late 60s when the Surgeon General's report on smoking cigarettes came out. But anyway, like every 25 years or so, there's a big surge in interest in cigars, and the most recent one, again, started right during the pandemic when people spent a lot of time at home. You couldn't really go out, and your options for entertainment were limited. And so I think what we saw, and really what a lot of industries saw, was an increase in consumption of spirits, an increase in consumption of cigars, and an increase of other sort of luxury goods that you could access and enjoy at home, and don't need to go out somewhere, since the pandemic really limited that for a while.
Yeah, I remember as a kid kind of growing up on 7th Avenue, there weren't a whole lot of cigar shops. There always have been.
Right.
But it seemed like it turned into mostly bars and
Sure.
restaurants, nightclubs, stuff like that.
That's right.
It's really made a comeback in the last few years. That property right next to 7-Eleven, the new building, Sterling Cigar Lounge.
It's beautiful. It's about to get ready to open.
Yeah, so cool. Are you guys affiliated with that in any way?
Yeah. It's been amazing for us to watch, too, the resurgence of Ybor City. You know, in the neighborhood around our factory here on the northern part of the historic district and certainly around 7th Avenue, too, Ybor City suffered for a number of decades. It became more of a nightlife entertainment district, and there wasn't a lot of activity during the day. Ybor City didn't attract families. People didn't want to live here. But all that has really changed in the last 5+ years or so for really lots of reasons. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing is just a surge in interest in cigars and more people moving to Tampa to make cigars and to celebrate the cigar culture here. And the new Sterling Cigar Lounge on 7th Avenue is beautiful, and that's a great example of this successful developer coming from New York, coming down here because Tampa is the cigar capital of the world and building a beautiful destination, a first-class experience to enjoy cigars.
We need more of it. And you guys are in such a great spot, too.
Yeah.
You know, this original, beautiful old factory, you guys have a ton going on as well. I've noticed there's construction on, I guess this is what, the west side of the property?
Exactly.
I know you own the real estate kind of behind here on the south side. What are your plans for all this property here?
Well, I think before I talk about our plans now, I should mention, particularly given the nature of your show, that Tampa was developed because of the cigar industry. Vicente Martinez Ybor came to Tampa in 1885, and he opened in 1886. That is before the city of Tampa was incorporated. And so there really wasn't much here. You know, the 1880 census, if you look it up, shows there are about 600 people in this area that we know as Tampa. There was Fort Brooke, the Army Fort downtown where the parking garage is now. There were some fishermen, some ranchers, and that was about it. There wasn't a lot going on. But when Ybor, after his search, decided to move his factory here and others quickly followed, Tampa was transformed almost overnight. And the 600 people that were in Tampa in 1880 grew to 30,000 by 1900 and more than 100,000 by 1930, making Tampa the largest city in the state, all because of the cigar industry. So if you look at the built infrastructure that we have here in Tampa, particularly in Ybor City, it was a lot of planned development by cigar companies. Mm-hmm. Not only building factories, but all around us in our grid here, we have homes that were built for cigar workers, that were built the same time as the factory. And the building across the street that I'll talk about in a second was built in 1910 as a hotel and cafe and cigar bar to serve this factory. And so the history of development in Tampa, in my view, really does start with the cigar industry and the cigar companies that came here and built company towns, in essence, all for the cigar industry. And it's why so many families like yours have been here for a long time. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, everyone who's from a few generations ago, ancestors, worked rolling cigars or making lunches for the cigar workers or making cigar boxes or printing cigar labels, because Tampa really was a company town, and that's what developed here. And in answer to the question you actually asked, not the one I answered, we're working to restore our corner of Ybor City right now. You know, where we sit here at 16th Street in Columbus, we're north of I-4. We're very much in Ybor City. We're in the National Historic Landmark District, but we're in the forgotten part of Ybor City.
Right.
Because during the urban renewal movement in the 50s and 60s, the federal government built I-4. And like they did in so many parts of the country, they built this beautiful interstate right through a low-income neighborhood. And what happened was that cut our corner of Ybor City off from the rest, from 7th Avenue. And so there just wasn't a lot of interest, focus, oxygen in our part of Ybor City, but all that's really changed in the past 5 years or so, and we're working hard to restore our campus here in Ybor City. And so, as you saw, we restored this beautiful building that's now 113 years old. We built a cigar museum. We restored this space and opened up this rolling room. We We have guided tours and host cigar rolling classes and have events. And we actually had 10,000 visitors in the factory last year.
Amazing.
We had 0 visitors 3 years ago, and now we've gone from 0 to 10,000 in just 3 years.
Well, I'd imagine anyone interested in cigars knows of Tampa. And of course, when they come here, they want to go to a factory and they want to go to the tours and they want to see all this stuff. I mean, 10 years ago, this didn't really exist. There wasn't a place where someone could go as someone interested in cigar history to explore it and actually walk through a factory and see the workers. I mean, it's incredible what you guys are doing.
We've been here, again, since '53, and our building was always closed. We still roll 60,000 cigars a day here, just like we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but it was never open to the public. If you came in off the street, you'd be able to go into our little reception desk, and that was as far as you'd get. What we realized was, because every other cigar factory closed here in Tampa, and we're the last ones rolling cigars here in Cigar City, that if we didn't open our doors, if we didn't invite people in to see the tradition, the culture, the heritage of cigar rolling in Tampa, nobody else would. Nobody else could. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to lose that history, and so that's why we restored this building. Oh, I forgot to mention, we had 22 weddings here last year.
You do weddings here too. Awesome.
I don't know who wants to get married in a cigar factory.
I think it'd be cool.
People do. I think
my wife might not agree.
Exactly. I think it's the partners that really surprise me that want to go for it. But to your point, we're hopeful that El Reloj, that this factory is becoming a destination for cigar enthusiasts. But my biggest surprise is that half of our visitors love cigars, and the other half have never tried a cigar in their life.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, who would think, if you don't like cigars, why would you come to a cigar factory? It never occurred to me that people would. But what we found is there's a lot of people who are interested in history, who like old buildings, who like seeing how things are made.
Right.
And so even if they don't enjoy a cigar, they're still interested in coming to our factory just to see this Tampa cigar making tradition. So we get to be ambassadors for the city and for Ybor City and our industry, and bring people in and help them understand about the culture and the tradition, the heritage here in Cigar City.
That's amazing. Thank you guys for doing that. I mean, that's incredible. I'd imagine there's a ton of people that have visited Tampa just in the last few years. This area's blown up, as everyone knows, right? We got Brady, we got all the development going on, all this crazy stuff. I'd imagine someone that visits Tampa, if they're not into a cigar, they go to Ybor City, they're like, oh, look at that cigar factory, let's go check it out. And now you guys have that avenue for people to come in and learn and explore. It's awesome. It's fantastic.
Yeah, as much development has happened here in Tampa, and all the excitement and the energy from everything that's new in Tampa, we don't want the story of Tampa's past to be lost. And so we think that the cigar tradition here in Cigar City helps define Tampa and make it unique and different from Orlando, Jacksonville, Charlotte, elsewhere. And so our hope is that Tampa, particularly here in Ybor City, we can keep this tradition and this history alive while still moving forward and developing and growing and expanding.
I align with that so much, because that's really the reason I started the show, was to expose that history and culture to the rest of the world. Yeah. And there's so many people, there's so many eyes on Tampa right now, and the families that have been here for a long time know that history. But I just feel like it's not being exposed in the right way. So kudos to you, man, and that's why I started this show, to expose that history and teach people about our awesome culture here.
There's so much in our state that's new. There's so many new people in Florida, so many new buildings, so much new development. There isn't a lot of history here in Florida, but aside from the fort in St. Augustine, you've got this beautiful neighborhood, Ybor City, 100-year-old buildings, brick streets, culture, tradition, heritage, and a lot of the new residents in Tampa just aren't aware of it yet. Right,
that's exactly right. And especially up here north of the interstate, when Tyler and I first pulled up, we kind of, there's a lot of one-way streets, right? So we missed it. We went around. We're going around a couple blocks.
Yeah.
What a cool little area, though. I mean, there's a lot of cute little properties, and like you mentioned, some of those old houses around here. I know you guys are doing some renovations on the outside of the area. What's going to go directly west right here? It looks like a park of some sort.
It is. So my grandfather bought these lots directly across 16th Street from our factory in the 1950s and 60s, and they've just sat vacant ever since. And visitors would illegally park there on these grassy lots, and when it rained, the lots would fill with water because there was no drainage there. What we're doing is we're turning those lots into a beautiful park that's almost finished. Because in our part of Ybor City, there's not a lot of green space. There's not a lot of community space. And so we want to build a space for people to be able to sit outside when the weather's nice and enjoy a cigar, a space for our neighbors, for our employees, or for our visitors to be outside and appreciate Ybor City, especially since cigars, we think of are an agricultural product. So having a park with trees and shade and nature fits perfectly hand in hand with a handcrafted Tampa cigar.
It totally does, man. And what great timing, too, with all the development. Daryl Shaw and his Gasworks project and Ybor Harbor. I mean, he's going to be developing so much property. You guys are kind of in a section, like you said, that was forgotten. So what great timing for you guys to be doing all this redevelopment right now.
We love Daryl, and I'm so grateful to him because not only does he have the vision to really help propel Ybor City into for the next 100 years, but he's doing so in a very thoughtful way that honors the history of Ybor City. One thing, there's so many things I admire about him, but he walks the historic district every day. He walks here. He walks down to Channel Side and Water Street. He walks over to the Columbia. So he really appreciates the history and the culture of Tampa, and he wants to honor it. It'd be so easy for an outside developer to come into Ybor City and whitewash the history and import designs from the Northeast or from California and build beautiful spaces, but spaces that aren't authentic to our community. And what he's doing with Gasworks and his other properties in Ybor City is build these beautiful new spaces that fit perfectly hand in hand with the historic fabric and culture of Ybor City. And so, we're just so grateful to what he's doing, and it's so exciting to see this real resurgence and transformation of Ybor City.
That's kind of the theme, too, walking, right? Walkability. Everyone wants to be in an urban environment. They want to live upstairs, walk downstairs, have amenities and parks and things to do. You guys are almost doing your own little Gasworks up here with this property you own.
We are, but we're not reinventing. We're not inventing the wheel here. We're not reinventing the wheel because this is what was done.
Right.
This whole neighborhood was built to be a neighborhood in 1910 with a factory as an anchor, with housing for cigar workers around it, with commercial mixed-use buildings, retail on street-level retail all around. This is built as a neighborhood. And so what we're doing is we're trying to restore the fabric of our neighborhood. We're calling it the El Reloj District.
Amazing.
Because this factory has been the anchor for the community for the past 113 years. So in addition to the park, which we're calling Cigar Workers Park, it's be dedicated to the cigar workers of Ybor City, and that's opening later this year. We're also restoring the old hotel that's across Columbus from us at Columbus and 16th.
Oh, phenomenal.
And it's a beautiful building. It's 15,000 square feet, 2 stories, and it was built in 1910 to service this building, and we're just going to make it look the same way it did 100 years ago.
How cool is that?
A small inn on the second floor, a cafe, a cigar lounge, some retail on the first floor, as a way to serve the 10,000 plus visitors that we have in this factory, and hopefully a way to spur further development here. And then after we cross that bridge and get that project open, we're looking to further develop some of these other parcels right next to us too, to add some more retail, add some more mixed-use development to try to help propel our neighborhood, our corner of Ybor City, and celebrate its history.
Phenomenal. And there's already a lot of other developers taking note of that, too. I know D.R. Horton's got a bunch of single-family properties and townhomes over here. There's other developments. I know there's some townhome developments down the street here. So you can kind of I can get the vision for it. I was even talking to Tyler, like I mentioned before. I could really see this area of Ybor City being the more residential, more quiet side. There's obviously the entertainment district on 7th, but I could see this area really blowing up, especially with what you guys are doing. I think it's phenomenal, man.
Well, thank you. We also have the Perfecto Garcia Cigar Factory that's over my shoulder. That's a block away. That's being
that's y'all's
restored.
too?
It's not ours.
Oh.
But the developers there are turning it into apartments. And so some more residences coming in. And then there's a lot of infrastructure improvements that are happening in our neighborhood as well. FDOT is reconfiguring exit 1 off of I-4, so you'll still be able to exit at exit 1 and exit at 21st and 22nd Streets like you do now, but they're changing the exit so that you'll also be able to exit at 14th and 15th Streets, just around the corner from us, making it easier to access. And then supposedly, maybe you know more than I do, but supposedly people in Ybor City keep saying that Brightline, the train line that starts in Miami going up to Orlando, is going to come here to Tampa, and the site that they're looking at seems to be right just on the other side of the interstate, about 4 blocks from here. And so there's a lot of positive momentum for our corner of Ybor City, and it's just a very exciting time to be here.
Totally is, man. I can't wait to live the rest of my life here and watch it all come together. The name of this factory, I don't want to butcher it.
El Reloj.
El Reloj.
Right.
And what does that mean?
It means watch or clock in Spanish, because it's the nickname of the factory. Every cigar factory here in Tampa had a nickname, and this building was nicknamed El Reloj for our iconic clock tower that is visible for blocks and blocks all around us. And the reason is because in 1910, in the era before smartphones and smartwatches and an era before most people could afford a wristwatch, the clock and its bell was how people told time, how they knew when to wake up in the morning and go to work, go to school, have lunch, come home, go to bed. It really defined the neighborhood, and the clock and its bell really helped people live their lives. And so that's why the building is named for the clock, and it's why the district that we're building around it has that name too, because this has always been the El Reloj district.
I love it. I noticed the workers have taken a break here, or maybe they're done for the day. My great-great-grandmother, her name was Rosa Cottarello. She actually rolled cigars, and I have some of her old equipment, and I'm actually noticing it's the same equipment you guys use today, the exact same way.
That surprises you?
I just think it's incredible that it's been done the same way for over 100 years. I think it's so cool.
That's a tradition of cigars here in Tampa.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. What's the schedule like? Just curious.
Sure. So we operate a traditional factory schedule. The factory starts operating at 7:30 and finishes at 3:30. So at this time of the day, our team is starting to wind down, starting to clean up and prepare for tomorrow. Back when I was a little kid, the factory used to run 2 shifts. And so morning and an evening shift, but that stopped in the mid-1980s.
And the 60,000 you mentioned, obviously that's not in this room.
We roll cigars here in El Reloj 2 ways, 2 traditional Tampa ways. One entirely by hand, which is what we're doing behind me. And then second, we use antique hand-operated cigar machines that my great-grandfather bought in the 1930s. So they're almost 100 years old. And it's what the Tampa cigar industry used back starting in the 1930s. So when Vicente Martinez Ybor came to Tampa in 1885 and opened his factory in 1886, all the cigars in Tampa were made here by hand. But because handcrafting cigars is a very labor-intensive process, in the early 20th century, inventors created these magnificent machines that help a cigar roller roll the cigar. And so we have those on the floor below us, and they're beautiful works of art, these antique vintage machines. And so together we roll about 60,000 cigars a day here, and our one goal as a company is simply to be doing this, rolling cigars the same way that we have been for 100 years, 100 years from now. And if we do that, we'll be successful.
Amazing. I also noticed there's a little, it's almost like a square thing with some sort of a paste in it. What exactly is that paste?
Oh, a paste? Oh, yes. It is. It's a natural. It's a product called Burmacol, which is a cellulose product. It's a synthetic
plant material.
It's a synthetic cellulose, which is derived from the genetics of plants, and that's the extent of my knowledge of it. But what it is, it's a naturally based adhesive that holds the tobacco together. And so as the cigar rollers are rolling the tobacco together, they'll use a little bit of the paste on the outside of the leaf, so the leaf just adheres to itself. And
doesn't add flavor or anything like that to it. Do y'all do flavored cigars?
We do not. Some people do. Traditionally in Tampa, cigars were not flavored. In recent years, other companies have added some flavors to cigars, but that's not our business.
Do you have any ambition to go outside of some of this traditional cigar rolling and do maybe cigarellos or flavored cigars, anything like that?
No, we have our hands full.
Yeah.
Cigar rolling is incredibly simple and incredibly hard. It's simple in the sense that there's no special tools that are needed. You can just use your own hands. It's a skill. But it's an incredibly hard process because there's 1,000 points in a cigar, in the life of a cigar, that can go wrong. And with it being a handcrafted product, it takes a tremendous attention to detail and dedication to make sure that every cigar is perfect every time you light it. And so we're very busy. Our plate is full, and we'll leave it to others to venture to other businesses.
I appreciate that. There was, I remember a few years ago, they opened back up Cuba. They actually had some cruise ships going back from Tampa to Cuba, Havana and all that. Obviously, Cuban cigars are a big deal. Everyone loves a Cohiba. During that few-year period, did you guys import any Cuban tobacco?
No, actually, Cuban tobacco has not been allowed to be imported in the United States since the Cuban embargo in 1962. It's something that we have petitioned the State Department to give us a waiver to allow us to bring in some Cuban tobacco to roll cigars here in Tampa, just like they were rolled before the Cuban embargo, but it hasn't been granted yet. I will say there's a certain mystique about Cuban cigars here in the United States.
Right.
Because everyone wants what you can't get. And if the government says you can't have Cuban tobacco or Cuban cigars, it's what people naturally want. But we sell the cigars we roll here and in Latin America to more than 80 countries around the world. And in every other country, our cigars are sold on the same shelves in the same stores to the same consumers as Cuban cigars. And so that the mystique that exists here in the States doesn't really exist anywhere else anymore, except maybe for China. Because I think just like with French wines versus California wines 30 years ago, cigar consumers have realized that there are fantastic cigars rolled all around the world, whether it be Cuba, the Dominican Republic, or even here in the United States.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah, I guess people you're right, they want what they can't have. There is such an allure with a Cuban cigar. It's like that name, Cuban cigar, people get all excited about that. Maybe one day, we'll see.
I'll say, if you go to Europe and talk about Cuban cigars, you'll have a very different conversation because they're not perceived that way anymore. Interesting.
When we were downstairs in I guess it was the first floor, there was a ton of boxes. And Sydney was mentioning that Fuente's coming through here. You guys are more than a manufacturer. You're actually a distributor as well. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So here in El Reloj, in addition to rolling 60,000 cigars a day, we're also a logistics hub for all the cigars that we make down in Nicaragua and for the cigars that the Arturo Fuente family sells to brick-and-mortar retailers in the United States. And so we import cigars, we bring them in, and we ship them out to about 3,000 mom-and-pop small family businesses, so cigar retailers, cigar lounges throughout the United States from here as well.
That's so cool. So you roll 60,000. Do you know the number on how many cigars go in and out of here every day?
It's tens of millions every year.
Incredible. That's amazing.
That's a lot.
So cool. And you mentioned 80 different countries too, so you're shipping your cigars all over the world as well.
We do, exactly.
Wow.
The premium cigar industry is very small. About 0.5% of Americans regularly smoke a premium cigar, so it's very small, and that rate is pretty consistent worldwide. but we're also a small industry too, and so there's just a handful of family businesses like ours that roll cigars today, and we're proud to share them with cigar consumers around the world. And that kind of also speaks to the nature of cigars, which is we live today in a very partisan world that's full of conflict and emotion and just angst.
Yeah.
But cigars are one of the few things that seem to bring down those divides and bridge the divides and bring people together. And it's really amazing. I don't know if you've experienced this, but if you go into any cigar shop here or elsewhere around the world, you can sit down with a cigar and you're just friends with whoever's there.
That's so true.
It doesn't matter your age, your race, your socioeconomic background, the language you speak. Cigars have this amazing ability to bring people together, to cut across divides. And it's really remarkable, and it's wonderful, and I kind of think we need more things like that these days.
I totally agree. Yeah, like on 7th Avenue, King Corona, right? Like if you walk by that place, oh my gosh, outside there's every kind of person from all over the world enjoying cigars together. It's amazing.
It's been that way for more than a century.
Yeah. Have you been to, I think the name of it is Cathedral Cigar Lounge right over here in Tampa Heights?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
what amazing. An amazing concept that was.
It is, and that's a great example of how cigars bring people together. Because the Grand Cathedral Cigar Lounge took an old, abandoned, neglected church and just reinvented it into this amazing destination for cigar enthusiasts. And again, it doesn't matter who you are, you can walk in there and you feel welcome,
right,
and at home, and are friends with everybody else.
And in such a cool environment too, how they've repurposed that old building
in a very authentic Tampa environment. Yeah,
right. Is there obviously we're smoking inside the factory here, which is so cool. I wish I could smoke in my office. Wouldn't that be nice? Gene's living the dream over here.
Yes. You have to test the product every day.
That's right, which is awesome. Are you guys going to build out an exclusive cigar lounge on any of your properties?
So the old hotel across the street that we're restoring is going to have a cigar lounge. When we restored El Reloj a few years ago, we thought about creating a place for people to actually come and enjoy a cigar here. But the reality is we just didn't have the space. This is a 90,000 square foot building, and it's completely full. We don't have room to have people here to be able to come and enjoy a cigar here, so we're going to build that space across the street in the old bar area that was in that building.
I think that'll be fantastic. I could see people who are obsessed with cigars because there is a culture to it. There's a cigar culture, and I think those people are going to be totally attracted to a place they can come and stay, come across the street, do a tour, buy some cigars, enjoy cigars in the lounge. I could totally see that being extremely popular.
Well, what we've seen and what's really inspired us is just how many wineries and distilleries and craft breweries have become destinations for tours and tastings and just to spend the night. And so what we realized was that we could do the same here in Cigar City. And there are thousands of wineries out there that must offer tours and tastings, and probably hundreds of distilleries and breweries. But until now, there hasn't been a destination for cigar enthusiasts. And so that's what we're building right here in Cigar City.
Yeah, you think of Napa Valley, right? Wine country. People get a party bus and they go from winery to winery drinking wine. Why not Cigar City? Why not come here and go to the factories and experience it all in one spot? I love the vision. I think it's cool.
And that's the culture. That's the culture of our city and what makes us unique and different from Austin or from Chicago or from Indianapolis. It's
totally
Tampa and cigars and history.
100%. So this building is 113 years old.
It is.
When you renovated it and you're peeling back the walls and opening things up, did you find any interesting artifacts?
Well, I think it's important to highlight the fact that our restoration was done very much in keeping with the U.S. Secretary of Interior's standards for preserving historic buildings. Like even in this space, the ceilings above us, That's original. The floors below us are original. The brick walls all around us are
gorgeous.
original.
Yeah.
And so as we were restoring this building, we simply started with what was already here. How's the building laid out? What materials were used? What were the original colors? And we simply used that to refinish our spaces and refinish the building. It would have been very easy to kind of renovate and rip all the old stuff
Paint it
out.
white.
Paint it white. Paint it white or gray.
Right.
But that would just ruin the historic character of this building. I think that's why so many people want to see this building, is because of the bones are all original.
I totally agree. Yeah, there was
and you feel it here. You feel the history. It's like walking back in time in El Reloj.
It really is. Yeah, there was that cigar factory in West Tampa that a developer bought, painted half of it white, and there was so much opposition to that, which I was one of those people. I thought, why would you do that? I don't know the story behind that, but they stopped the project. It's been sitting there for a couple of years now. And then another factory, the West Tampa Clock Tower, that old cigar factory. I think that's actually turning into a wine, not a winery, but
the Boschiano family bought it, and they're from Italy, and they make wine, and they want to turn it into a site to produce wine, also to host events and do tastings there. That building was abandoned for a while, so it's not as in good of a condition as this factory was, because it's always been occupied. But where they are in West Tampa is also outside of a historic district, and so their building, my understanding is, it's not protected. So what they can do and what they are going to do is sort of different from the work here in Ybor City, where the buildings are protected, and you have to go before the Barrio Latino Commission to make any improvements to the exterior.
Yeah, you're probably limited on exactly what you can do here. But like you mentioned, you're not motivated to change things. You really are. You want to keep things and restore them. Like you said, the next 100 years, you want it to be the same, cigars rolled the same way.
Exactly. I mean, it's not easy living in a 113-year-old building and restoring it, and there's a lot of steps along the way. We're consulting the Barrio Latino Commission. We also work with the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service too, and it's a lot of people, a lot of bureaucracy, but we actually find that it's helpful because there's a lot of people knowledgeable about old buildings, how buildings were built 100 years ago, how Ybor City looked 100 years ago, and so the sort of the state, the city, the federal folks who've helped us have been really invaluable in helping us understand how to care for a gem of a building like this one.
I think that's so important. I was in Boston a couple months ago with my mother, and they've kept a ton of their historic buildings. All the buildings are brick, beautiful brownstones, and it's incredible to look at. And when you lose that history and new developers come in and they build condominiums and everything just kind of looks the same and that culture gets washed out. So it's really nice that you guys have kind of kept that look. And I think it's great that there's kind of an oversight that says, hey, look, we're not going to let you paint it white and gray. You know, we're going to make you keep that kind of brick look.
You know, we've been in the restoration process now since 2018. We've never heard the word no really from anybody. What we've heard is, have you thought of this? Or here's how it's been done successfully elsewhere. And so I think our experience with the Barrio Latino Commission and the city staff and others is not an adversarial process. It's very much a conversation. It's about really having outside experts kind of consult and say, like, this is the way to solve your design problem. This is how it's been done differently. This is how transoms were built in 1910. And so it's much more of a collaborative process. And so it may take a little longer than a new construction, a new development, but it helps us and really helps the neighborhood preserve its character, which I think really adds value to Ybor City and again, makes it feel and be distinct from so much that's new everywhere else.
And that's what's so exciting about a visitor coming here is they can see what it looked like over 100 years ago. They can get a sense of, wow, I'm in a real historic place. You know, there's something special about that.
Exactly.
There's been too many buildings that have been torn down recently with all the new development. couple downtown. There's one actually in Channelside across from where I live that just got torn down. It's really sad to see, which is why I love what Daryl Shaw, back to him, what he's doing is incredible. The northern part of his project, all those buildings are going to be brick, 5 stories or less, kind of keeping with that historic Ybor character. And then as that development moves closer to downtown, there'll be regular towers like you'd see in any other big city. So he's really complementing the area in a great way.
Well, he's filling in a gap between Channelside and Water Street in Ybor City, and as you said, doing so in a very thoughtful way and rebuilding the street grid and sort of filling that chasm between two big anchors in our city. So I think we're very excited by the project, and again, it's just only going to help Ybor City be successful for the next century.
100%. So how many Newmans are right now working at this cigar company?
So there are 3 of us. There's my father, my uncle, and I are in the business right now. I have 2 younger cousins, my uncle's sons, who are working in cigars, but in a different in a different way.
Interesting.
But we're a family, and hopefully we'll keep this business going for another 4 generations, another 128 years.
I love it, man. That's incredible. Either your dad or your uncle and my dad were really good friends back in the day. I've heard some crazy Gasparilla stories.
Probably my uncle, Bobby.
Was he the crazy guy?
He was a little
fun
more
guy?
adventurous than my father, exactly. And he was also a bachelor until he was almost turned 41. And so
it was probably Bobby then.
Yes,
that sounds right.
He had a very active social life. Of course, now he has 2 grown children, has been married for 30 plus years, and all of that. But
he's had his fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he still remembers most of what happened, I think.
That's amazing. I think on the tour, there was a tour in here earlier before we started on the podcast, and your tour guide mentioned that one lady has been working and rolling cigars for 27 years. Is that the longest roller you have working here?
Cigar roller, maybe, but we have tremendous longevity. We have employees who've been here for 30 plus years, for a couple of reasons. One, I like to think that we've got a very supportive and good community and team here, but also we're the last cigar factory left. 50 years ago, when Tampa was full of factories, cigar workers could move from one factory to the next, and skills were transferable, but we're the last factory still rolling cigars, and so we want to keep the tradition alive, but it also is a very specific skill set that may not be transferable to other industries.
Right, yeah. I'd imagine if you're rolling cigars for 27 years, there's not a whole lot you can transition into after that would complement your skill set. There's an old picture you have on the wall here of a factory. Is that this factory?
No, but what we did when we did complete the restoration a few years ago is we went to the city's archives, and actually they're maintained at the Hillsborough County Library System. They have a whole collection of Burgett Brothers photos that really show Tampa as it looked in the first early parts of the 20th century. And there's just an array of images of Tampa's cigar history. And so what we've done is we've hung many of them throughout the factory, showing how things were done 100 years ago, right next to where we're doing the same thing today. And so when our rollers are rolling, you can see the process, the tools, the equipment looks the same today as it did 100 years ago. Just the people are different, the dress is a little different,
right? But
the tradition, the legacy hasn't changed.
There's a lot less of them, though. In that picture, looks like hundreds of people rolling cigars. Do you know how many people rolled cigars in Ybor City at its peak?
I don't know how many people were rolling at its peak, but at its peak, Tampa made 500 million cigars by hand a year, which is an enormous number. If you enjoy cigars today, last year there were about 430 million cigars sold in the entire United States, from the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, elsewhere. Wow. But 20% more than that number were made here in Tampa 100 years ago, just in Ybor City and West Tampa, which is why Tampa really was Cigar City.
Right.
And more cigars are rolled here than in Cuba and anywhere else. And so at its peak, there were cigars, and there was the port of Tampa, and everything that supported those two big industries.
Well, back then, cigars were the, I guess, main source of, ingesting tobacco, right? This is kind of pre-cigarette, obviously pre-e-stick, whatever, vapor, whatever it's called.
Cigarettes were really a product of World War II.
Yeah.
And then electronic nicotine products really just started about 10 years ago. Both are very different worlds, and I don't really understand either.
No, I never got into it, thank God. I mean, I've never really been addicted to anything, which I'm very lucky to not have that type of personality. I do love a cigar. But it's incredible to me that, there was so many cigars here rolled that long ago. And then today you've been doing the same process. So for me to sit here and see that picture with hundreds of people rolling cigars, and then to be in this room when there's maybe 6 or 8 people, what a transition over those 100 years. Do you ever see cigars maybe not getting back to that point, but at least becoming even more prevalent than they are now, and maybe you having a room 3 times this size?
Not here in the States. The labor costs are really high here, and that's good because the standard of living is high here in the States, and workers can afford to provide for their families. But we have a large factory, about 800 people down in Nicaragua. The Arturo Fuente family in the Dominican Republic has an even larger factory, and that's where you can make a lot of really great handmade cigars in large quantities. This factory here on the 3rd floor is designed to be a boutique factory, making limited edition, special projects that cost more because labor costs are higher, but also because we're using the best tobaccos in the world, which is why we roll the American, our flagship cigar, here in very small batches.
Well, this thing's getting down to a nub. It's a phenomenal cigar. It's one of my favorite ones I've ever smoked. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you do any tours down in Nicaragua? Do you have that set up?
Not really, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to open this factory, because here in Tampa, if you can come from all around the States to Tampa, enjoy the beaches, the other activities here. We're a 15-minute drive from the Tampa International Airport and how convenient it is. So we're just a short Southwest Airlines flight away from most parts of the States, but going down to the Dominican Republic and especially Nicaragua, you need a passport. It's a different language. The factories in Esteli, Nicaragua, are about a 3-hour drive on a bumpy road from the capital city, Managua. It's a lot harder to get there than it is to get here to Cigar City. And so by opening up our factory and becoming a tourist destination for cigars, we're able to showcase the cigar tradition, cigar culture in a way that we really can't do, or and others can't do in Latin America.
Yeah, totally. It's I could see Tampa being a cruise ship destination. Right now we have a port, and it's the part where you get on the ship, you go to the Bahamas or Mexico, and then you come back. I'd imagine a lot of people that fly in from the Midwest or for anywhere else in the world that come to Tampa, they're going to want to come here and they're going to want to check this place out.
We hope so.
Yeah, of course. Do you think that Tampa one day could be a destination, a cruise ship destination? I mean, it's right there. It's not too far away. It's only about a mile.
It's amazing to see how many visitors come to Tampa. And as we enter this world of hospitality and open the doors to the factory, our first and best partner has been Visit Tampa Bay, our local visitor and tourism bureau, because they do such an amazing job marketing the whole region to visitors domestically, internationally, and they help guide us on how to host visitors and tours, and they bring media through here, through us and through Tampa all the time. But it was just about 2 weeks ago, a new cruise ship came in to Tampa, and they had us bring a roller over to the terminal at the port and roll cigars there. And so I think Visit Tampa Bay is doing a great job at trying to market Tampa not only to the tourists that come here, but also the tourists that pass through here and go on cruise ships as well. And hopefully that will continue.
I hope so too. It's pretty ambitious what y'all are doing, especially with a hotel across the street. Was that kind of your idea, like the new young Newman coming into the mix with these fresh ideas?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think so. The answer is yes. My father and uncle have been working in this building for 50 years. They've been making cigars. They love the business. They love cigars. They love the history. They love our people. But I don't think they were aware that other people would like to come here too, for tours, for tastings, for events, for weddings. And so I think it's been eye-opening to all of us, but especially my father and uncle, the fact that people really do want to see and learn about Tampa's cigar tradition, because it hasn't been just really a part of what we've done or what anyone has done ever before.
So your father and your uncle, did they do anything else before they worked in this factory?
Not really. My father went to college and went to graduate school. My uncle followed the same path, and they both started working here in the early 70s.
Amazing. 50 years, and of course you plan on doing the same thing.
You know, my great-grandfather, J.C. Newman, founded our company in 1895 and worked to the day that he died at the age of 83. My grandfather worked until the day he died at 90. I mean, he drove himself to the office that day, and it just collapsed in my dad's office. My father and uncle are not retiring. I don't want them to retire. They'll work here till the day that they die, and God willing, I'll do the same.
That's amazing. And J.C. Newman, what did the J.C. stand for?
So my great-grandfather's name was Julius Newman, and when he came to America in search of the American dream, a better life, in 1888, he entered through the port of Baltimore, and the inspector there, the immigrations officer, interviewed him as part of the immigration process and reviewed his papers, reviewed his forms, and one of his forms asked what his name was. And he wrote Julius Newman, but he left the middle name field blank because he didn't have a middle name. And so the immigration officer said, if your first name is Julius, I will give you the middle name Caesar. So J.C. Newman stands for Julius Caesar Newman, which was my great-grandfather's name, the Caesar being added when he came to America in 1888. But you know, the immigration officer must not have been that well educated, because he misspelled Caesar.
Oh, no.
The Roman general, the Roman emperor, is Caesar. But on his immigration papers in 1888, the officer wrote Caeser. And so if you look at our Diamond Crown Julius Caesar cigars, you'll see that it's spelled Julius Caeser. And people think it's because we don't know how to spell the name of the Roman general, but that's not the case. It's because that was the name that my great-grandfather was given when he immigrated to the States.
Fascinating. I always wondered, Julius Caesar cigar, what's that about? So that was your great-grandfather. That's amazing.
That's the story.
That's cool, man. Listen, Drew Newman, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for letting us do it here in the factory. This is so cool.
Well, this is Tampa. This is our tradition. This is our culture. This is our heritage. And we're just working to keep it alive.
And if people want to follow you online, website, how can they reach you?
So our website is jcnewman.com. We're all on social media as well. I'm American Rolled on Instagram. You can follow me as well. But more importantly, just come and visit. And we'd love to welcome you and all of your viewers here to really experience Tampa's cigar heritage.
Fantastic.
El Reloj.
Thanks again, man. I appreciate it. All righty. Bye, everybody.